Rick.
Hello again, and welcome to SCLC TV. I'm your host, Maynard Eaton, and of course, our president, our leader, our CEO, Dr. Charles Steele Jr. Dr. Steele, President Trump has put a deadline on census polling for September 30th. Today, Mayor Keisha Lance Bottom says that's wrong, and we should extend the census. She says it's a political play by the Trump to limit the legitimate vote. Your thoughts on the census being shortened, and what it will mean to poor and black folks?
Well, we always get the shortest end of the stick when it comes to fairness and doing what's right, Maynard. Let me say this, and then I'm going to go back to that question. I want to commend the people who watch our program every week before I forget it. And Mr. Eaton, that is your name. They always compliment you. Mr. Eaton asked you this. Mr. Eaton said, I just want to say, we don't take it for granted. We appreciate our viewers and their response. And I'm elated over the fact that one gentleman told me he get a lot out of this and motivated by the way you and I correlate your questioning me and the way you pin me down sometimes. So I just want to say that because I forgot to say that. And I just want to say to you, keep up the good work.
Well, we want to thank our director, Rick Clear, too.
Oh, it couldn't happen without Rick Clear, our producer. Absolutely, Maynard. Rick is the best in the field, and we want him to know that we appreciate him. But to get into the political aspect of the president, in terms of the census taking and the political ramification of just being unfair, being abusive in terms of the language, in terms of lack of respect to people of color, and to the family or the institution of the family as a very significant point to all Americans. And when you get to degrade and denigrate a particular segment and racial makeup of society, then the impact of your being respected is very limited. And I'm saying that the president has lost a lot of respect, not only from people of color, but from Americans and people around the world. I just got off a Zoom with a group of leaders out of Brazil, actually Sao Paulo and Rio de Janeiro and Brasilia. And we're going to do a workshop on the historicity of SCLC and the civil rights movement. The first thing the leaders of that country said to me in terms of community activists was that people don't trust the government. People don't trust the government in Brazil. And I chuckled and I said, guess what? People in America also in the same boat in terms of lack of trust of the government. Dr. King said the government is the enemy. And I always say, redundantly, this country, in the terms of politics, has never freed us. We freed us as a people, fair-minded thinking folks of all ethnicity and background, and people of color, Negroes, colored folks, black folks, and people working with us. We couldn't have done it without a correlation and a collaboration of others' ethnicity and background of people working with us. We freed ourselves through the hard work, the lynching, the castrating, the denigrating, all of this. We put pressure on the government. And I said all that to say this, Mr. Eden. It's no difference than today. We have gone backwards in terms of freedom. I was just reading some information on Dr. King just today. And I always studied Dr. King and his philosophy. And it's saying that freedom is very expensive. And what he meant by that, in my perception, is that it's very expensive to your life. You know, you have to sacrifice, a supreme sacrifice, Many
It's
times. That's why
costly.
many folks. Go ahead. What you
Very
say,
costly.
Mozzie?
It's costly. Freedom
It's
is
very
costly.
costly. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And that's what Dr. King was saying. So what am I saying in a nutshell? I'm gonna be finished with this. Is that we don't trust this president to any degree, and I'll just leave it at that. He is always trying to be disrespectful because of the position of the Oval Office and being president. That he think he can just ramshade the whole citizenry of this country, regardless of black, white, green, or blue. He's intoxicated. He's intoxicated with power. And that power will backfire on him comes November.
Well, with the elections fast approaching, there are many concern about voter suppression. Investigative journalist Greg Palast put out a report suggesting 200,000 Georgians alone have been taken off the rolls illegally. A group named All Voting is Local says there's no list maintenance. Should there be no list maintenance until after the election? Basically, people were wrongly removed from the voter polls. That concerned you as well, I'm sure.
Absolutely. What we need to understand is that when we, and I keep saying this, and the people who keep saying something is wrong with the suppressing of the vote at this particular time, 2013 is when Section 4 and Section 5 was eradicated from the 1965 Voter Rights Act. Maynard, I have a problem with folks not talking about the real problem. The real problem, we going back to state rights. And that's Jim Crow, that's racism. That's lynching. That's removing you from the polls and suppressing the vote any way they can because you no longer have protection from the federal government. I have a problem with the federal government. I have a problem with state government. I have a problem with local government because of racism. But my real problem is that don't people understand that you got to have courage to speak out and tell the truth. There's no protection that we had from 1965 Voter Rights Act in terms of Section 4 and Section 5, which you have to have pre-clearance from the federal government. States can do what they want to do now. And it's all bad for people of color.
And we see that happening in Georgia at the very least and across the country, do we not?
You know,
When
in
these
the last
elections come?
Yeah, you saw when people weren't even trained to run the machines, man. And we were dealing with both aspects, you know, the mechanical aspect of electronic voting as well as the paper ballot, because they're trying to satisfy two entities, which I don't have a problem with that. But some people say the paper ballot is better, some say electronic. So Georgia tried to satisfy both sides. But the problem was it was controlled by the state. And the state itself had no control of the training. If anyone were training, even from the top, had you had Section 4 and Section 5 in there, it would have to be pre-cleared by the Department of Justice, the Justice Department. DOJ will have to approve it. Nothing was approved but from the governor's office and state government.
I heard on President Trump last night on TV suggested he has widespread support among the black electorate. What are you hearing? What are you sensing? I have some black Republican friends, but does he have some?
Go ahead.
I'm saying, does President Trump have widespread support as he claims?
I don't think so. He lies about that and other things too. No. And I think we have our ears to the ground. We have people every day and every hour informing us, and we have facts finders, because everything we say on this program or in Zoom or the speeches that we give, we can prove it. Now, a majority of the people are hoping that potentially with the nomination for the Democratic Party, that Mr. Biden would have an ear for the people. And I have hope in that, which I'm skeptical. I don't care who's running, because of the historicity of the United States of America and its government. I still say no politician can free you. No politician can remove the stigma from us not getting loans at the banks. Only 3% of African Americans get loans from the traditional financial banking institutions. Something is wrong with that. We need reparation. I haven't heard anybody talk about that, even during the Democratic primary, other than one candidate. And I won't mention his name because he's not in the race now. But that particular issue has to be dealt with. Reparation for Black folks, reparation for people of color, reparation for us being in slavery. And we're still economically in slavery and socially too. And the lack of access to capital. When you don't have no money, you're walking around and you're breathing, but you are enslaved because you can't take care of the institution of the family. You cannot contribute to the religious community. You are just existing, and it's time out for us surviving. We have to be productive and collaborate and help one another in today's world.
I want to move on to one other subject. But Dr. Steele, do you realistically believe we'll ever have reparations? That sounds great. But in your heart of hearts, you think that politically that will ever really happen?
I think it will. I think it will.
Really?
I really do. Whoever thought that, and I just got off a Zoom speech out of Brazil just prior to coming to tape this show with you and Mr. Clear. And what they were saying was that still what goes on with African Americans during this pandemic is affecting us and the rest of the world. We taking our lead from you. Why would they be on a Zoom with me and they are over in Brazil and they asking me to show them the way out of here? Or as you know, man, one of the leading magazines in the country, France, based out of Paris, France, did an article on me, lead story, right, in one of the most recognizable magazines. The Time magazine of France did a story, right, on SCLC and my leadership. So what am I saying? Right. We as African Americans and with the institution of SCLC, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, we have a responsibility to lead the world now. And there is a plan that many of people who see us as a threat to fairness and to bring about opportunities for all God's children and to be the glue to bring all us together is determined not to let SCLC be elevated to that level. But guess what? We're already at that level. We have the historicity. And regardless of how people try to get in front of us or how people try to take the credit, we have been there. We have been there. We're not only just the co-founders, we're the refounders in terms of the approach of direct action. You have the Army. Oh, you love this, Mr. Eaton. You have the Army, you have the Air Force, you have the Navy. But guess what? We're the Marines. We're the Marines.
The Marines of civil rights, huh?
We're the first to hit the beach. Yes, sir. We're the Marines. And many people don't want to get hurt. Oh, yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Eaton.
I like that one. Finally, I want to ask you another question. Final question. There's been a $12 million settlement given to Breonna Taylor's mother, which is probably justified, but it seemed like a whopping sum, and some police reforms came along with that settlement. But I've had some critics whispering to me, not whispering, telling me, why Ben Crump is always there? Is he kind of chasing checks, as one critic put it? What do you think about Ben, and what is Ben Crump doing with his money? Is he helping at all? There's some people wondering why Ben Crump is always there. We don't hear about what else he's doing.
Okay, and that's a good question. And as you know, I don't back up from your tough questions. First of all, Attorney Ben Crump is a good friend of ours. As you know, Ben has been a friend at SCLC for a number of years. He and I are personal friends. I commend him for doing what he's doing in terms of trying to bring some type of harmony and justification to get a settlement. First of all, you got to have a case and a point, and you have to have the ability to deliver with the backup And I think what being blessing comes from is that he got the backup of all African Americans and people who saying go, Ben, go, just like at a football game. You don't see nobody trying to cut him off. Now, what we don't know is behind the scene, like people don't know about us. We're doing so much for folks, as you know, Mr. Eden. People could never imagine what we're doing throughout the world and in this country for people, because there are some things for the public that you do and let folks know. There are some things that you do for the public and it's nobody business but your group, your organization, and God. You can't do nothing by yourself but the committee that works behind the scene. So what am I saying? I'd like to see more collaboration, yes, among all Black leaders and Black people. But it starts with us. Who happen to be us? When people say, hey, Steele, why don't you come over to this meeting? Because we invited the great attorney, Mr. Crump, Ben Crump, and we invited the NAACP, and we invited NAN, and we invited all the other civil rights groups. And we want you at the table as well. That's what's missing. The collaboration where we all sit at the table and break bread together on a strategy and plan. But I commend the settlement that Attorney Ben Crump has gotten, and I hope that it's a continuation of all the other cases that he's working on. So we're here to support him, but I'm always looking for collaboration.
Well, sir, I thank you. I hope he's here to support us too, since we are the Marines of the Civil Rights Movement. I'm going to remember that one. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been SCLC this week. See you next week. Take care, sir.